Hello, welcome to Myelopathy Matters, the official podcast for the charity Myelopathy.org.
Where we talk all things degenerative cervical myelopathy from the perspective of the professionals, the researchers, and the people living with myelopathy.
I'm Michelle Starkey, I'm a scientist and the director of Myelopathy.org.
And I'm Ben Davies, neurosurgeon, researcher, and co-founder of Myelopathy.org. Well, it's episode 2, and we have had some feedback on episode 1, which is important, and we would really encourage, because this is a bit of a work in progress. And it was clear that we had some listeners who didn't really know who we were, which I guess is understandable.
And we didn't introduce ourselves.
So maybe we should start with that bit.
Yeah, good idea.
So who are you, Michelle?
So currently, as I just said, I'm running Myelopathy.org, but my background is in neuroscience. And I was particularly interested in spinal cord injury and stroke, so sort of different conditions that affect the central nervous system, and in particular the rehab and regeneration from that. So I started in the regeneration field, looking at ways of enhancing fiber growth in the spinal cord and in the brain, and later then moved on to working more clinically and looking at various rehab devices and different techniques of helping people get back some function. And most recently I've been working on wearable sensor technology and using that to sort of read out what people are doing in their rehab and trying to inform how to do it better. And it was through that I came to Cambridge, heard about the charity, and that's where I am today. And
a complete field change now, because there's no longer any Petri dishes, any cells, any wheelchairs and sensor technology. There is the growing charity of Myelopathy.org.
It was really funny, actually, because when I was a basic scientist, I used to go to meetings and hear from clinicians and think, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Actually, you really need to know the details. But as time goes on, especially if you're interested in the rehab field, there becomes a point where you've got to work on humans and you've got to understand, how these different theories and ideas actually pan out in the clinic with real people. I had a switch in the previous job but one. And I remember in that interview, the person interviewing me was saying, but have you ever worked with humans? And I was saying, no. So you never did anything in the NHS? No. But, the principles still stand from the theory to the practical side of it. So yes, I think,
And how have you found adjusting to sort of running the charity now, which has been over a year or so?
Yeah, so very, very different to being a scientist. I think what I've most had to develop is my interpersonal skills. So as a scientist, you're often working on your own for long periods of time or in a small group. And of course, with the charity, it's lots of different people from lots of different fields, everyone with different areas of expertise. So sort of navigating that has been the sort of biggest challenge and the biggest reward as well. So now, we're at the point where we really want to try and make a difference and raise awareness about the condition. And I'm hoping as a scientist, I'll be able to talk about that a little bit from the science side and then use these new skills to sort of get the word out there. Yeah, so we'll see if I'm successful. So do you want to introduce yourself,
I guess,
Ben?
yes. That's Michelle 3.0. And I'm Ben, and I'm a trainee neurosurgeon from Cambridge. I met Mark Cotter here and became captivated by this problem of myelopathy, which I'm really keen on trying to make a difference in. And as part of that, we realised there was no information available for people really affected by the disease. If you searched it in Google, all you could find out about was canine myelopathy, which is a similar disease common in dogs. And we created a web platform to try and provide that information. Subsequently met Ewan Sadler online, who was trying to cultivate this sort of peer-to-peer support community, which we then merged with and eventually became a charity. And I think it's sort of growing very, very slowly, organically. and that's where we are, really. And whilst sort of supporting this charity, I also do have to go to work sometimes and have a research interest as well. So that's me.
And the Ewan you refer to is your flatmate and from that you were talking to in the
from
last
New York.
episode.
Yeah, I mean, so I met Ewan through Facebook, because he was running that support group, and we connected over Facebook, and since met him offline a number of different times, and he really leads on trying to organise and promote that support community, and also inform the direction of the charity. And I think it's a relationship which is continuing to blossom and work really well. And he's also now been involved in some of the research that I do, so it's a sort of growing friendship, really.
Yeah, and he's got a real skill in speaking to people and knowing
Yes.
the types of things to say, and he's the one that puts out all of our sort of messages on social media, and really gives us feedback on how that's going and what people think. And so, yeah.
And all the graphics as well. Ewan's fantastic with the graphics. But I think that comes on to, why do a podcast? And I mean, it really is a work in progress, but what we had found, and again, talking to Ewan, was that the connection between the charity and the support group was perhaps lacking, and there was a lack of awareness about how the whole thing worked together and what joined up and what we were working on. And the aim really of the podcast was to try and become a mouthpiece to make sure people in the community were aware of what was going on, and felt part of the community through perhaps interviews or sharing their stories, but also that we could try and reach a new audience, because we were trying to become this sort of flagship for anyone interested in myelopathy.
Also, recently on the website, Ewan did a blog post about his sort of use of computers and tablets and how that makes his neck hurt quite a lot. And so I think it was also with that in mind as well, that, for some of you that are listening, it might be difficult to sit for hours and look on the computer, and therefore you can just tune in here and we'll give you sort of updates on the most recent things we've been doing and people we've spoken to.
But I think anyone has any ideas, and obviously some feedback came through. We learned that Ewan did find his hairbrush in New York, which is important. But seriously, though, if there is any feedback on how this is shaping up or what we're doing or whether we should be doing something differently, I think this is, we're very much open to ideas. We see this as a community, and we're day-to-day organising a part of that, but it really is adaptive and responsive to what the community needs and wants.
Definitely.
And I guess the email address is info@myelopathy.org, or of course you can connect with the team on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. 2020, it's a new year for Myelopathy.org, and I guess January is an important time to think about the future and New Year's resolutions.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So as a quite organised person, of course, this completely stresses me out if I'm not completely ready on the 1st of January to go with my resolution. And I wasn't this year. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to go for, but I think my resolution is going to have to be better at staying in touch with people. I think one thing that annoys me about all of this technology these days is there's so many different ways to get in touch with people, which just means there's even more ways for me to let people down by not getting in touch with them. So my New Year's resolution is to make sure I keep in touch with my friends a little bit better. Life is a bit hectic, but I've also been spring cleaning the house, even though it's winter, getting rid of the things we don't need and passing them on to
charity. Other people. Oh, the charity, yeah. The presents.
Well, we're thinking about the environment. We don't want to fill landfill, do we?
No, we don't. I don't. But I guess, important that the connections and friendship is an important part of well-being, and something obviously that we try and promote in the charity. But going on to your first part about being, disorganised and also the friend list idea, I do want to mention that I have brought with me your Christmas present.
Oh, that's lovely. Oh, this is lovely. Look, I've got my own Spine Wars T-shirt.
Spine Wars,
in a very fetching navy blue.
And it wasn't quite the purple that you'd indicated was your best colour.
No, but dark blue is better than light blue.
Is that right?
Don't need to go.
And if you're listening, we need more dark blue tops. But obviously, this is
that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Ewan, piggybacking off some of the recent film productions, has produced these great T-shirts and much of the merchandise, which has been doing very well and again supporting the charity. But I think it also brings on another concept that Carol, who's one of the team here looking after sort of ideas and creativity, has come up with, which is May the 4th be with you, which is something we're working towards in terms of perhaps being a day where we can think about activities to support and fundraise from the charity.
And we're definitely doing this from our side. So I'm working together with one of our trustees, Helen, coming up with some ideas of different things we could sort of suggest to you that you might want to be involved in. But yes, we're looking at this for the future to be a day when perhaps we could focus on raising money for Myelopathy.org. So we're sticking with the topic of New Year's resolutions and looking to the future. And we're going to be speaking to two ladies that have myelopathy and are now moving on with myelopathy. The first being Tammy Blizzard, who has founded a Facebook community page called Moving On with Myelopathy, which is now affiliated to the charity and also our other support group. And we're going to be hearing from Janet Crockford, who did an 1,000-mile walk on behalf of Myelopathy.org, raising money and also awareness for the charity.
Fantastic. So that's coming up, but of course we'll start with a few updates from what's been happening in the last month at Myelopathy.org, and we're delighted that Paige Howard has come on board as one of our admin volunteers. Paige is based in the States and of course, has had myelopathy and been treated for myelopathy, but is very kindly stepping up to support the support group. I think it's helpful in different time zones and different action points because there's about half the community there from North America and half from the UK. So I think I'm really delighted that she's agreed to be part of the team. But in terms of the support group, obviously one of Mark's visions was to think about looking at offline communities, and we know from the Recode meeting in New York how powerful it can be for people to meet offline as well as online. And we've had an inquiry from a Brad Barker based in Cambridge who's going through his treatment for myelopathy, and he's looking to set up an offline support group in Cambridgeshire.
Yeah, this is fantastic. It's something, as Ben says, that we were thinking about doing, but it's fantastic that Brad wants to do this himself, and we'll be interested to see how that goes. We'll support him as much as we can. We've started to think about a pack that we could put together for these types of events with sort of suggested questions and topics to discuss. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how that goes.
Yeah, and I think if you're based in the Cambridgeshire area or you're interested in participating in such a group, do get in touch and we can link you with Brad. And I think if anyone's got any ideas about how this kind of thing can work and spin out and grow, then again, please do get in touch. I think it is a really powerful opportunity. And then, of course, we have finally, it's been a long time coming, and I guess that can be a frustration. We have finally just published some of the results from a survey that we conducted almost 3 years ago now, which was a survey of the Myelopathy.org community, the largest ever survey on the perspective of people with myelopathy, talking a little bit about how it affects them, the impact and their experience of treatment. And then the first sort of study that we put together really looked to showcase the significant delays that the people that face with myelopathy, because whilst that had been talked about quite anecdotally by professionals, it had never really been recorded in great detail. And what the study found was that in 800 people that participated in this survey, 70% are facing a delay in terms of getting to their treatment, with almost half waiting more than 2 years. And one of the interesting things about that delay was that we managed to associate that as a link, that if you had a delay in your diagnosis, if you like, then there was an association that meant you had greater disability from your myelopathy. And I think that's not something something that's certainly been shown before, that time to treatment is important in terms of how responsive the treatment is. But I think it's one of the first studies in large numbers to really show how important and how prevalent that issue is of getting access to treatment is today.
And when you say treatment, in this case, that would be surgery.
Yes, that was in the mainstay surgery. At the moment, surgery is the only treatment that seems to really be able to modify the trajectory of the disease. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in this case, it would be because the symptoms are sort of diffuse and it's not very widely known about.
I mean, we didn't really explore that in that particular survey, but it's something that we're trying to work hard on, because it's a question of why is it that that people face such delays. And the only thing we did have a look at in that study was whether certain groups of people have greater difficulty getting diagnosed than others. And interestingly, the Black Afro-Caribbean ethnicity seemed to have a greater delay than white Caucasian, although they're only in very small numbers in that study. So that's points perhaps, I don't know whether to inequalities or what, but something to look at. But I mean, those are all really important questions that we need to get to the bottom of in order to understand how we can bring forward diagnosis and ultimately treatment.
And I wonder whether certain locations of the country experience differences as well. We attended a conference last year sometime where that seemed to come out. There are certain areas where people are put forward for MRIs much quicker than others. And so there's a certain inequality there as well.
I think so. A postcode lottery, I mean, that's based in the UK system, isn't it? And I can't really speak with experience of the North American system, but certainly the care pathway is very messy. It's lots of different people are involved, and there isn't really a straightforward route to a diagnosis today.
And like you say, time is spine, so we need to change this.
We do. Time is spine. Time is spine. And I guess that's the sort of latest from what we've been working on in this month. And I guess time to think and hear from our first guest, who is Tammy Blizzard. Tammy is, or was, unfortunately, a veterinary surgeon from Pennsylvania, who kindly had a bit of time to talk to me in New York following the AO Spine Recode DCM meeting. And Tammy, well, she underwent treatment, I think, almost 5 years ago now, and is starting to adjust to a different life, a life which is obviously not 100% how she was before. And she's found this support group you mentioned called Moving On with Myelopathy, thinking about looking to the future and trying to be positive about celebrating things that that she can still do and still enjoys. So Tammy, thanks very much for giving up some time today. I guess the question is, why did you set up Moving On with Myelopathy?
So I started a group called Moving On with Myelopathy because I think I started it just over a year ago. My first surgery was 5 years ago. I tend to be a very upbeat person. I've got a lot of, just like everybody, I've got a lot going on in my life. And I feel like I've got to attack life with positivity. When I sit here and I think about what's going on and how it's impacted me and changed my life, it's not great. And I can make a choice about how it impacts me. I can enjoy life and make the most out of it, or I can let it get me down and I can gripe about it and be miserable, and not get any enjoyment out of anything again. And I would rather concentrate on the positive, try to look forward. There's a lot of bad things that have happened in the last 5 years. There's a lot of medical mistakes that have happened to me in the last 5 years. And nothing is going to change that. So I think one of the greatest freeing things that I had a few months ago was just accepting I'm not going to work again. And I need to find what I can do again rather than what I can't. And for Moving On with Myelopathy, there's a group called Myelopathy Support online, and it's wonderful, and I was part of it for a long time. And it is primarily people that are preoperative, just diagnosed. They're really scared. They're post-operative, which is a really scary time, an emotional roller coaster, a physical roller coaster. But for me, I found I was stuck in that time, very emotional, very physical time. And if I want to move on and try to better myself, have a better quality of life, I needed to let go of that time in my life and move on with what I do have. And make the most of it.
And when do you think the right time is for somebody to consider joining Moving On with Myelopathy?
I think initially one of my qualifications was to be out a year. And it's not necessarily that time zone or not, but I think when people do get out that far after a year, they're going to realize in retrospect they're just at a different mental and physical spot than they were. They're not overwhelmed with grief. They're not overwhelmed with all these physical challenges and just everything that's posed to us initially. And when they just want to move on and they have started to accept what has happened to them, surgically you tend to find your norm 1 to 2 years after. If you're not going to improve, if you're going to improve, you tend to improve by that time. So you know what you're going to be having. Are you 95% normal? And life's pretty good. You're almost what you were, but not quite there. It's hard to continuously being battered by people that are are at a really tough spot in life. So I think when you're just ready to move on, make the most of things, try to deal with the changes that have been handed to you and deal with them in the best way that you can, then that's a great time to join Moving On with Myelopathy.
And can you give us a flavour of what might happen in the group, what happens and what goes on in Moving On with Myelopathy?
I think with myelopathy, you go through phases. Like the first bout of it, you're in shock. And then you're going to surgery and post-op. Most of us, that's what's happened. But then you get to a point that you're trying to find the good in what's going on with life now, despite having a radically impactful diagnosis of myelopathy. So one of the biggest posts that I do every week is called Moving On Monday, Brag on Yourself. And this is things like what I said is I made a really nice dinner for my family 2 nights in a row. And for a normal person, that is not a big deal at all. But for somebody with me that for probably 3 years I couldn't make a nice dinner and I love to cook, that is a big bragging point. And rather than concentrate on the fact that I couldn't do it for a long time and I need a stool to stand on so my arms don't hurt and everything else, I concentrate on the fact that I made a dinner. I love cooking for my family. They enjoyed it and it was good. And I want to concentrate on the good that's happening in life so I can better enjoy it.
Well, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us. I'll leave you to get back to your John Denver karaoke, which I think was what got you here in the car. But of course, I should just make everyone aware, if anyone's interested in joining Moving On with Myelopathy, you can either search directly for the group on Facebook or you can find more information on our website, Myelopathy.org. So it was great talking to Tammy. It was a real pleasure to meet her finally. Obviously, I'd heard of her and you and spoke very highly of her over Facebook, but I think what she's trying to do is transition away from a period of time which is very difficult for her.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think it reminds me, and actually I made a mistake in the last podcast, it reminds me when I worked in the field of spinal injury. If you keep referring to people that have a spinal injury as a patient, it's actually very insulting because they're a patient for the period of time that they're in the hospital. But after that, they're someone with a spinal injury. And of course, life continues and, there has to be an adjustment to that. And I think this Facebook group sort of shows that, doesn't it? There's a period of time where you've just had your diagnosis, you're preparing yourself for surgery and all that entails and getting used to the idea that your life is going to change. But of course, after a period of time, then it just becomes your life, doesn't it? And it's a different life from what you imagined. But yes, you want to move on.
And I think it's something that we've been acutely aware of, that whilst we've created this support group, I say we, you and largely led that, and the great team of volunteers that support the running of that, but it's not necessarily best suited to absolutely everybody. And some people come into the group and find it highly rewarding, and other people find it a little bit difficult. And I think it's an example that we need to try and make sure that the support is better focused to individual needs. And I think we talked about Brad developing the offline group. It's about trying to create more versions of those groups that people can find the group that best suits them, whether it's based on the geography or based on the time on their myelopathy journey. And I hope with this sort of opportunity to affiliate with other ideas like Tammy's, that's something that we can really support.
Yes, definitely. And I think, we're really lucky in the support group that we have people who've been through the surgery and are happy to talk about that over again with other people that are facing that. But of course, there's other people that don't want to relive this time in their life where, potentially it was very hard for them. And, so Tammy's idea of having a space for all of those people, they have a shared experience, but of course now they're going off in their own ways and living their lives. And I've seen some of the photographs from the group, and it's fantastic because very different to the support group where it's very much focused on the surgery. This is now people out and about in the countryside and
walking,
like Janet,
Janet, who we're going to hear from a second, walking around. Yeah, and I think I learn lots from talking to people with myelopathy, and I think Shirley is one of those individuals, and she's an example again of where she's looked for the positivity to try and support her health and well-being. And she gave us this quote, which I just think is a really important one. And it's on the website, I think. It says, "I might not have the life I envisaged before becoming disabled with myelopathy. It's definitely a different road I'm traveling, but nonetheless, it's still a life worth living, and I intend to live it." And I think that positivity and that attitude is something that we really need to try and cultivate, whether it be in the Facebook groups or indeed offline. And yeah, I hope we can try and create that in our community.
Yeah, it's such a positive outlook on her new life. It's very inspiring, I think, for all of us.
It is. And talking of other inspiring individuals, I guess our next guest is Janet, who comes from Lincolnshire. She tells me that she doesn't have a Lincolnshire accent because she came from Kent, although not on foot for that particular journey. But she was an ultra marathon runner, she tells us, I think.
Yes, that's very impressive. And I wonder whether that is the sort of drive that's led her to do this incredible feat of walking 1,000 miles, not in a straight line, or multiple trips. But yeah, very interesting. We had a nice chat with her.
We did. And I guess we should hear from the lady herself.
Okay, great. So today we're on the phone with Janet, who did an amazing endeavour over the summer, walking 1,000 miles, raising money for Myelopathy.org. So we've decided to have a little chat to her to find out a little bit more about her and why she decided to do this, and her tips for any of you who might think about doing something similar. Hello, Janet.
Hello.
Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, there's not much I can say really. I've had myelopathy for 2017. I had the operation, and I'm recovering quite well. But obviously, I still have something there.
So, what sort of problems has it left you with, Janet? If you don't mind sharing that.
It's mostly that my legs are a little stiff, and I have spasticity, and just general really, just not as well as I should be.
There are similar symptoms to a lot of people.
A lot of people,
describe.
Yeah. And so, when did you decide that walking 1,000 miles was going to be the best thing to do?
Well, last January, I saw an advert for it. Up until then, I was getting fed up because I'd had to give up my job, and I was quite aimless and didn't have anything to aim for. And then I saw that, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And the more I walked, the more I wanted to walk. So that from starting off doing 2 or 3 miles a day, I was doing 4 or 5, 6 or 7 miles a day. And really got enthused by it.
So when I first heard about your challenge, I was wondering whether you'd walked from one place to the other and 1,000 miles. But in actual fact, it was a number of different walks. So
yes, I went out every day.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So was it all in your sort of local area, or did you travel to other places?
Almost all in local areas. Occasionally I went. If we were away somewhere, we'd go for a walk, but most of them were local.
And
all on mostly on the flat. But there were some hills.
And starting in January, it sounds like it might have been a sort of New Year's resolution type thing.
I suppose it was really, although it wasn't that. It was just seeing the advert that brought it to my attention at the time. And just when I decided to do it.
Did you go on your own, or did you take someone or a dog with you, or someone else?
No, I go on my own, but my dog is too big for me. He would drag me over. So I have to leave him at home. And so I go on my own, although, if we're away, my husband comes with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. How did you first hear about the charity, or did you get involved with the website or Facebook group? How did you hear about us?
Well, way back, not long after I had myelopathy, I searched for support group and found it. So I was involved in, I was looking at the the Facebook group for some time beforehand. And when it became a charity, I thought, I'll see how this goes. And if I'm still walking that August time, then I'd raise some money for the charity. And that's what I did.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And I think it really fired up people's imagination because we shared information about, the endeavour that you were undertaking, and other people found it really interesting and obviously donated. So that was fantastic. And thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it raised over £100. I think it was a real major achievement.
Yes, I was quite pleased. I think there was also some extra that I'd had to pay. I paid in beforehand that didn't get accounted for. So yeah, I was quite pleased. And also another thing, everybody, quite a few people that sponsored me had also looked up the website to find out more about myelopathy, because I didn't know anything about it until then. So that it became, we became more aware of it.
Yeah, thank you. That's brilliant.
So that's dual purpose, that sort of fundraising, awareness. No, that's really, really impressive.
So have you continued walking?
Well, I had until I had the stroke, but I am now doing about 1.5 miles a day. So I'm going to gradually get back to it. Yes.
Were you a keen walker before all of this, or?
Yes, I was. I used to do long distances. I walked 100 miles was the longest, and anything really I would walk. And also a runner. I was an ultra runner.
Wow.
Wow. God, so the myelopathy must have been really struck things down a bit.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't believe that I would ever get anything like that. It came as a shock to me. That I did get it, but it's just, one of those things that happened to me.
Now moving on. And did you find that the activity helped how you were feeling, or any of that spasticity that you mentioned?
Yes, I think it did help. It helped mentally, and also it helped a little bit physically. The spasticity, it didn't go away, but I think it eased off a little bit. Yeah, so benefited from it.
Final question, really, is any sort of tips or suggestions for how somebody else might take on a challenge like this or come up with a challenge like this?
Start off slowly. With not, a mile a day is something, and then just gradually build it up. That's all I can suggest, really.
One step at a time.
Yes, yeah.
It's a very impressive feat, and I think it's really interesting to hear it's both helped you physically a bit, mentally. It's obviously the awareness, but also the fundraising for us, which is really helpful. And I really thank you, and hope that those steps can continue. And stay in touch when the next challenge does come to you. So I think that was really inspirational to hear from Janet. That's something that she's really taken of her own volition. Something started as a New Year's resolution and became a fundraising opportunity. And
what better example of moving on with myelopathy? She's walked all that way, and she talked about the positive effects it had on her, as well as just the physical. So. And I think it is absolutely fantastic, inspirational. I think we're really appreciative of those sorts of initiatives, because fundamentally we are trying to look for ways to fundraise to support the activities of this charity, which really about trying to drive awareness. It's about trying to offer different types of support, whether it be through the online or offline communities. And of course, on the research side, one of the initiatives that we're promoting at this stage is AOSPI and RECODE DCM initiative, which came up with a list of top 10 research priorities, and it's trying to focus the world and the field to answer those questions. And one of those questions indeed was, how do we raise awareness and improve time to diagnosis? Mm-hmm. And obviously that's the first thing that we're going to focus our energies on. But all of these types of projects require funds and support in that sense, which is why this year we're going to focus on as many fundraising events as we possibly can, although we're very new to this. So we're currently sort of racking our brains for different ideas and different ways of doing this, both from our side, the management side, but also from our supporters. That would be fantastic.
So if you have any ideas, please do come through. I mean, Janet's not the first person to have events. Frank went to his local football match, I think, and handed out some leaflets and had a table and collected a bucket and things, which was fantastic. And I know there's been art sales and book sales and things. And we're trying to focus down based on Ewan's Spine Wars campaign on May the 4th. As a sort of focus day event that might be able to sort of germinate some opportunities amongst the community, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, and there's definitely lots of different ideas. We see that every year with the various different fundraising drives they're televised. So from something very small up to something that's a much bigger challenge like Janet did. I know my husband's been threatening to do an 100-mile bike ride in the summer. And if he manages to get there and gets the training under his belt, then he's also going to do it to raise money for Myelopathy.org.
A lot of ifs in that. I thought there's a bit more certain.
He's registered, so I think it's going to happen. And encouraged by his proposal to do this, one of our trustees, her husband, has also signed up for a bike ride. His ride's going to be in Italy the same weekend, I think, so they'll be riding together for Myelopathy.org.
Same distance? Can they do a sort of...
I think so, yeah. We could track them, couldn't we?
Them. No.
So perhaps we'll talk to them in one of our future podcasts about what they're doing to raise money. But you don't have to do something quite as energetic as that. There's lots of little things that can be done, bake sales or coffee mornings or things like that. The type of thing I enjoy much more, actually.
Bake sales. Sponsored spring cleans. Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for listening. And again, as I iterated at the beginning, or we iterated at the beginning, it's very much a work in progress. And, if your ideas or feedback or things that you'd like to see featured or people that you think we should talk to, then please do get in touch. But in terms of next month, we're going to put the spotlight back onto a research focus as opposed to a focus today, which has really been on the community. And we're delighted to be talking to a chap called Dr. Arya Nuri, who is one of the driving forces behind why we now call the disease Degenerative Cervical Myelopathy. So we'll hear about how he came up with that term and why. And we also have one of our trustee meetings coming up in February, and it's an opportunity for the community to put your questions directly to the trustees. So if you do have any questions, please do send them through to info@myelopathy.org, and we will make sure those questions get answered.
The trustees have slightly different experience to one another, and if you're interested in reading about them and what they've done before, head to the website and you'll find them in the About section there. But yes, get in touch with any questions you might have for them, and we'll put them on the spot in the next podcast.
Sounds good. Thanks very much for joining us today. And of course, thank you to both Janet and Tammy for giving up some time to talk to us. The podcast was produced by Carl Homer from Cambridge TV. If you've got any questions about myelopathy, the podcast, or anything in general, please do get in touch. That can be done through Facebook at facebook.com/myelopathy. You can email us at info@myelopathy.org. And of course, there's always lots of more information and support to be found at myelopathy.org.